She had arrived at the charity gala feeling invisible, in a simple dress that drew sneers from the glittering crowd. But when the auction began, the room's attention shifted in a way she never expected. A single, anonymous bid changed everything, and the person behind it shocked her to the core. What was meant to be a night of humiliation turned into a revelation she could never have anticipated. Hello, my friends. I am Olivia, and this is Olivia's Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. I stood just inside the grand ballroom, clutching the small silk clutch I'd borrowed from my mother, feeling the weight of my own self-consciousness more than the bag itself. The chandeliers above sparkled like fractured stars, and the hum of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, drowning the little voice inside me that whispered, "You don't belong here." I had always lived quietly, tucked into the corners of life where no one paid attention. My apartment smelled faintly of jasmine tea and old books, a safe cocoon where I could breathe without judgment. But tonight, I had promised myself I would try something different. I would step outside that cocoon and attend the annual charity gala, not for the glitter or the gowns, but because my heart ached to make a difference, however small, in the lives of children who didn't have a home. That was my need, to be useful, to matter in a world that often seemed indifferent. I smoothed my navy dress for the 100th time, its fabric modest yet elegant in its own quiet way. Around me, women shimmered in sequins and satin, their laughter carrying like music across the polished marble floor. I felt eyes flick toward me, a few whispers escaping like tiny needles. "She's wearing that?" I heard someone murmur, a delicate cruelty that left me momentarily frozen. I gritted my teeth, reminding myself that their opinion was irrelevant. I was here for the children, not for applause. The auction stage gleamed at the far end of the hall, bathed in warm light. I edged closer, hoping to observe without drawing attention. My pulse quickened as the first item went under the hammer, an intricately painted sculpture. Bidding started, the gavel hitting the podium in rhythm with my racing heart. I chewed my lower lip, my fingers gripping the clutch like a lifeline. And then it was announced. The next item was a private weekend getaway at a luxurious mountain lodge, proceeds going entirely to the Children's Foundation. I knew I couldn't afford to bid anywhere near the flashy amounts the others would toss around. Yet my heart whispered, "Just try." I raised my hand, almost trembling. The auctioneer nodded, and I whispered my number. A pause. A small murmur ran through the room. Then, the unexpected. Another hand shot up, higher than mine. My stomach dropped. I glanced toward the stage, squinting to see who dared outbid me. My eyes met no one in particular. The bidder had remained anonymous, shielded behind the crowd. Yet the bid was generous, far beyond what I could have imagined. I sank slightly against the wall, my thoughts whirling. Who could this be? Why would someone offer so much for something I wanted so badly, for a cause so dear? And then the auctioneer leaned forward, his voice slicing through the murmurs of the crowd. "And our anonymous bidder is none other than tonight's host." My breath caught. The host, the elegant man who had floated through the room with a calm, charming smile, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries. The man who had appeared untouchable, distant, like a figure in a dream. And now he had just outbid everyone in the room for my gesture. I felt a strange mixture of shock, embarrassment, and curiosity bloom in my chest, and I realized the night had just begun, and I had no idea how much it would change everything. The room seemed to shift around me, the chatter dimming into a soft background hum as my mind tried to process what had just happened. My hands were still clenched around my clutch, though I wasn't sure if it was from nerves, excitement, or disbelief. The host, my anonymous bidder, he had just turned the tide of the night, and somehow I knew I couldn't ignore him. I stole a glance in his direction. He stood near the stage, the warm glow of the chandeliers catching the angles of his face, highlighting a calm confidence that made him almost untouchable. Yet, for some reason, when he looked at me, there was an unmistakable softness in his eyes. A smile tugged at the corners of his lips, small, almost imperceptible, but it carried weight, a private acknowledgement of something that only he and I understood. I forced myself to take a steadying breath and approached the stage. My heels clicked against the marble floor, a deliberate rhythm that seemed impossibly loud in my own ears. Around me, the crowd continued to chatter and laugh, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I felt a strange combination of excitement and terror. What do I say? Do I thank him? Do I even have the right words? "Thank you," I finally managed to whisper as I reached the stage. My voice sounded foreign, fragile, almost betraying the composure I had tried so hard to maintain. He extended a gloved hand toward me, not in formality, but in warmth. For what? His voice was smooth, calm, measured, yet there was something intimate in the way he asked, as if he already knew. "For this," I said, gesturing to the bidding slip, my cheeks heating. "For supporting the foundation, for making this possible." His gaze lingered, studying me like he could see past the surface into the quiet corners of my life. "It's not just about the auction," he said softly, almost as if sharing a secret. "It's about the reason you're here. That matters more than anything else tonight." My throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to me that way, seen the quiet yearning I carried around like an invisible weight. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself, and found that for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small, invisible, or unworthy. I felt recognized. The auction continued around us, but for a moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of us. I wanted to ask questions, to understand why someone so poised and untouchable would notice me, of all people. But before I could, the auctioneer called the next item, a rare painting, and all eyes shifted to the stage again. Yet my mind remained tangled with him, with the quiet gesture that had felt like an unseen hand lifting me out of my fear and self-doubt. I tried to refocus, but the thought nagged at me. Who was this man really? Why did he care about my bid, about me? Then it happened. The moment that made my heart stop and my chest constrict with both fear and anticipation. The auctioneer announced a live bidding war for the final item of the evening, a scholarship fund in the name of a local child in need. The host's eyes flicked toward me, just briefly, but that glance was enough to make my pulse stutter. And just like that, the entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the first hand to rise. Was he going to bid again? And if he did, why would he? The answer would change everything, but I had no idea just how far this night would take me. The room was electric, every eye trained on the stage as the auctioneer raised the gavel. The scholarship fund, something I cared deeply was about to go under the hammer. My hands trembled slightly, whether from excitement, nerves, or the thought of him watching me, I couldn't tell. I stole another glance at him. The host stood with that same composed elegance, yet there was an intensity in his gaze that made my stomach twist. He had been generous tonight, yes, but this felt different. It was personal. The corners of his mouth lifted, almost imperceptibly, as if he knew I could feel his attention, and it made my heart race in a way I wasn't prepared for. The auctioneer began the bidding. A few hands shot up immediately, and the numbers climbed faster than I could comprehend. I knew I couldn't match them, not really, but then I felt it. The quiet thrill of being part of something bigger, of being seen not just as a spectator in a glittering world, but as someone who mattered. And then, he raised his hand. My breath caught. It was a deliberate, smooth motion, calm and confident, yet the weight behind it was unmistakable. My mind stumbled. Why him again? Why is he bidding for this? The auctioneer called out the number, higher than any other bid. The room's chatter seemed to fade as all eyes focused on him. He remained perfectly composed, yet there was a spark in his eyes when they met mine, a quiet declaration that this wasn't about wealth, or status, or the rules of the evening. This was about something else. I felt a lump rise in my throat, an unspoken emotion I couldn't name. Gratitude, awe, confusion, and something tender, dangerously tender. My cheeks flushed as whispers floated past me. Who is he? Why does he care? I didn't know the answers, but I felt the pull of something undeniable, a gravity I couldn't resist. The auctioneer's gavel finally struck. Sold to our anonymous bidder. The words reverberated through the room, echoing in my chest. He had done it again. He had taken the thing I hoped for, the thing that mattered most to me tonight, and elevated it beyond anything I could imagine. After the applause died down, I found myself walking toward him, almost without thinking. My feet carried me through the crowd, every whisper, every glance fading into a blur. I reached him, and for the first time, he acknowledged me fully, not as a guest, not as a participant, but as me. "Thank you," I breathed, my voice barely above a whisper, though it felt like the most important thing I could ever say. He smiled, that same enigmatic smile that had been there all evening, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of us. "You don't need to thank me," he said softly. "You deserve this, more than you know." And in that moment, I realized that the night had shifted irrevocably. What had started as humiliation, as a test of courage in the glittering shadows of high society, was now something else entirely, something charged with possibility, with the quiet recognition of worth, with an unspoken connection that made my pulse stutter. But then, just as I thought I might speak again, he leaned closer, his voice barely audible over the murmurs of the room. "There's something you need to know about me, about why I did this." My heart froze. The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and fear. I wanted to hear him, to understand, but 1,000 questions swirled in my mind. Who was he really? And what would happen when I finally found out the truth? The answer was coming, but I wasn't ready. He looked at me, his eyes steady and calm, yet carrying a weight that made my chest tighten. "I've watched you tonight," he began, his voice low, intimate, drawing me in as if no one else existed, not just here at the gala, but the way you move through life, quiet, unnoticed, yet full of heart. That's why I bid. That's why I'm here. I blinked, trying to process his words. They were flattering, yes, but more than that, they were truth. No one had ever seen me like that. My lips parted, but no words came. All I could do was stand there, feeling the pulse of his sincerity radiate through me. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from my face. The touch was electric, delicate, and terrifying all at once. "You don't need to shrink," he whispered. "You don't need to hide who you are behind a simple dress or quiet corners. Tonight, you've reminded me why I love seeing the world through eyes like yours. Honest, kind, brave." My heart raced, a mixture of awe and disbelief. I wanted to speak, to tell him he had no idea how much this meant, but my voice caught. The emotions I had buried for years, the insecurity, the longing, the hope that someone might see me, flooded through me like a tidal wave. Then came the truth he had promised, the revelation that made my knees weak and my chest pound. He leaned closer, his eyes locking with mine, and in a voice barely above a whisper, said, "I'm the host." But not just the host. You could say I've been living a life most people only dream of. Wealth, status, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is that I saw you, and I wanted to give you something real, something that mattered. I felt the world tilt, my mind spinning. The man I had only admired from afar, the figure who seemed untouchable and enigmatic, was here, not just bidding anonymously, not just generous, but invested in me, in my heart, my cause, my world. I I started, but he smiled, silencing my uncertainty with the warmth of his hand over mine. "No words needed," he said. "Tonight isn't about grand gestures or appearances. It's about connection, about seeing someone for who they truly are and choosing to act, to support, to honor that." Tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness, but from the weight of recognition, of being acknowledged in a way I had longed for my entire life. The glittering gala, the whispers, the judgment, they all faded into nothing. Only him, only this moment, only the truth remained. And then, as if the universe itself had held its breath, he added with a small, almost shy smile, "And if you'll let me, I'd like to continue seeing you, beyond tonight, beyond the auction, beyond all of this." My lips curved into a trembling smile. My heart swelled with a mixture of joy, disbelief, and the quiet certainty that something extraordinary had begun. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. I felt valued. I felt alive. The gala continued around us, laughter and music filling the grand ballroom, but I hardly noticed. I was tethered to a new reality, one where simple gestures held immeasurable meaning, and one extraordinary man had chosen to show me that I mattered more than I had ever dared to believe. And in that moment, I realized, sometimes the simplest dress, the quietest heart, and the bravest step into the unknown can change everything.